way too quiet.
It works for Hecate boy.
Hey friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all are doing well. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I am a practicing witch, and I lead the Solar Court Coven, which is a local sort of neo-tradition here in Indy. I make content about witchcraft stuff, so if that is something that you are interested in, check out my channel, stay for a little while, sit for a spell, check out my links down below. And if you are a returning subscriber, it's really good to see you back. I hope that you've been doing well. In today's video, we're going to be talking more about American traditional folkloric witchcraft. Recently, I published 2 videos here on my channel that were originally just one big video, but I thought it would be better to split them up into 2 parts. That way they're, I don't know, easier to digest, and it's not just one big hour-and-a-half long video. The full extended version, of course, is available on my Patreon if you would like to go check that out. In our last segment, we had Natalie and Astra, and we just talked about the tradition of American folkloric traditional witchcraft in a sort of broad sense, what it is and what it means to us as traditional witches here in the Midwest. And that was a really, really good discussion. I had a lot of fun, and a lot of you seemed to really enjoy it as well. So I figured we would just kind of continue this series. I'm not really sure like what the trajectory of this series looks like. If you have questions that pertain to American traditional folkloric witchcraft, which I'm probably just going to refer to as ATW, American traditional witchcraft, for the sake of this video, so I don't just keep repeating all of that. If you have questions or prompts that you would like answered through the lens of this tradition, feel free to leave those comments down below. And a real quick sort of plug here, the Red Thread Academy. If you're new to my channel, you might not have heard me talk about this. If you are a regular of my channel, then you probably know that I've been mentioning it here and there. And that is because the Red Thread Academy has been such a wonderful experience that I highly recommend to any witch that is looking to sort of develop their own understanding and their first power, their first pillar of the witch, which is to know thyself, to know thy craft. Especially for witches that are based here in the States. It's a really good academy. It's online, it's self-paced, and there's 3 years to the academy. So there's your first year, second year, third year, and I believe each of them are associated with like 52 assignments. So it's roughly like 1 assignment a week, plus like some book reports and other things. But it's been really rewarding and I've really enjoyed it. I'm currently about to wrap up my 2nd year and enter my 3rd year of study and training in this tradition. And I'm so excited. And that's another reason why I'm just like geeked to have Astra and Natalie here on my channel. They are both very knowledgeable, well-versed witches in this tradition. Natalie and Lorelei actually are kind of founders of American traditional witchcraft, dare I say. I feel like I can say that. And they put a lot of this work together, and then they split and they had their own coven lines with Crossroads Coven and with the Spiral Castle with Karashi. So it's been a fun experience to sort of come into this tradition, actually from my friend Taya, who's also here on YouTube. Highly recommend her channel as well. And she's based in Canada. And it took a Canadian witch basically to bring me back to my roots, which I always kind of joke about. Being able to sit down with Natalie, who's really sort of this matriarchal founder sort of figure in this tradition, is such an honor. And then of course, you know I love Astra, and Astra and I used to do the Daughters of Cain podcast, which was kind of a campy, kiki, trad witch podcast that's here on my channel if you're interested, but she's extremely knowledgeable and skilled and talented and beautiful as well. So some of this might feel a little bit like deja vu because this introduction, I am probably just going to be copy and pasting over both halves of the next installment of American traditional folkloric witchcraft tradition, whatever the series is going to be called. I'm not really sure about like the trajectory of this project. I'm kind of just filming and making these videos as I can, and when Astra and Natalie are available, and trying to get 3 witches' schedules to overlap all at once is a lot like trying to herd cats. So the stars have to be in a specific sort of alignment. We all have to have a specific amount of spoons. Like, there has to be food and drink present. It has to be like a specific temperature. Like, there's like variable factors involved. Not sure how long we're going to continue this. This could be the end of this sort of series, at least for now. We could continue it on. I know that we have talked about maybe doing a video talking about like tools of an American traditional folkloric witch. I know that we have talked a little bit about like pop culture-y stuff and recommendations as far as like books and movies go. So I'm not sure. If you have questions though surrounding, you know, American traditional folkloric witchcraft, and there are topics that you would like us to discuss through this tradition's lens, please leave them down below or send them to me on Instagram. Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me directly. It's also linked down below. So without any further ado, please enjoy this next installment and let me know what you think. Until next time, blessed be, and I will see you in hell.
Hello, my name is Estradia.
And I'm Natalie.
And today we are going to be talking about a lot of things.
Yeah.
But we're going to start with talking about cryptids and the Fae.
Woohoo!
Today on Jasmine Ambrosia's Disney Channel. Woo.
American folklore traditional witchcraft is the idea of witchcraft in an initiatory system that has to do with the folklore of America and being in the United States. Specifically, we work in the Midwest because we're Midwestern witches. We're here in Indiana, in Indianapolis, at the Circle City, which is a very magical place. And do you have anything to add?
It sucks here. No, I'm kidding. Folkloric witchcraft is about the tradition of folklore that exists here in America and honoring those spirits and working through those spirits to achieve our various witchcraft goals, whatever those may be.
Everyone, this is Yenny.
If you hear any demonic sounds during the course of this video, it's her. So in this episode, Natalie and I are going to be talking about traditional witchcraft and folklore in the sense of the land. And a major aspect of the folklore of the land, especially in the United States, is cryptids. The dictionary definition of a cryptid essentially is an animal that is believed to exist but has never been proven to exist. Now, we also know that cryptids don't necessarily specifically have to resonate with animals. Mm-hmm. They can be very humanoid in nature. Take the Mothman for existence, the Goatman, Bigfoot. All of these can have humanoid qualities, but generally speaking, they are seen as animals. Also, if you hear heavy breathing or demonic sounds, this is Yenny.
Hi, Yenny.
She is here for moral support.
One of the things that is interesting about this region of the United States is we are very close to Appalachia. And the Appalachian mountain ranges have an antecedent in Caledonia, which is in Scotland. The Caledonian Mountains are the same range as as Appalachia. They were formed at the same time before the continent spread. There's a school of thought that the same kinds of spiritual beings of the land that would have been found in the British Isles would also be found in Appalachia and the surrounding region. What's your favorite cryptid?
Oh, ooh, that's a hard one.
I know.
I have a lot. Okay. One of my favorite cryptids, and it mostly stems from the fact that I just like to say the name. I do love Chupacabra.
Good choice. Good choice.
I actually have a plushie of a Chupacabra at home.
Will you explain to the audience what a Chupacabra is?
So a Chupacabra hails from South American and I believe Mexican folklore. What it looks like is kind of up for dispute. A large amount of like the imagery that you'll see of a Chupacabra appears to be something that is somewhere between reptilian and canine. And it is an animal that is also referred to as
The goat sucker.
because it has been given the reputation of feeding on livestock. Now, whether or not this creature actually exists, I don't know. That's what makes it a cryptid. But lots of reports, especially in the South American region of the United States, people have called the police departments and things like that, saying they've seen red eyes glowing in the fields and their livestock comes back mangled and eaten and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. I really think I just like saying the word Chupacabra.
Chupacabra, it's a fun word to say.
It's a fun word to say.
I have some strong opinions about Mothman.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so I don't necessarily think of Mothman as a cryptid.
No?
No, I think of Mothman as a Native American owl spirit.
Okay.
Yeah. So definitely a harbinger of the dead, because that the tribes that are around Southern Ohio, I guess the Miami, have the belief that an owl spirit is a harbinger of death. And Mothman appears before a large accident occurs.
You know, it's interesting because in Mexico,
Mm-hmm.
they also see the owl or an owl spirit called the lechuza as a harbinger of death and also as a witch is familiar.
Nice. Well, my favorite cryptids, I have a couple. I love the Squonk. The Squonk is he West Virginian? Okay. A cryptid that is supposed to be so ugly that all he does is cry all the time about his condition. And you can find him by following his trail of tears to where he's at. And I think Squonks are adorable. All of the pictures I've seen of them are so cute. And I want to just grab the Squonk and go, no, you're beautiful. Don't cry. The other one that I love is the Loch Ness Monster. And I love the Loch Ness Monster because when I was a kid, the Loch Ness Monster is something that got me interested in cryptids. I wrote a paper about the Loch Ness Monster. And, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So we're in Indiana, and Indiana has a pretty interesting list of cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
Most notably, the one that people come across the most is the Beast of Busco, which is a giant snapping turtle.
Mm-hmm.
I've not had too much experience with this, but I have had some experience with what I would call river monsters. I grew up in a town on the eastern border of Indiana, and running through much of Indiana is the Whitewater River. And in my town, there is a place that we called the Hollow, where there was a little place where people could go swim. And unfortunately, a lot of people have drowned in there. And a lot of the people had said that they had seen sightings of people being dragged beneath the water. Now, this section was not like particularly like hazardous or anything like that, but you know, water, especially rivers and things like that, can still have undertows and things like that. But it happens a lot, or it happened a lot back when I was still living in that town. So I would definitely say that we have a history of water monsters.
Oh yeah, I
Here.
have a friend whose cousin was killed because they were dragged under by a snapping turtle.
Yeah, snapping turtles are no
Mhm.
joke. Another thing that's interesting is we have a lot of werewolf lore.
Yes, because of the French influence
Mhm.
throughout Indiana.
There was quite a lot of French influence through Indiana, a lot of French settlers, and with them they brought the legends of the loup-garou. We actually have a place here in Indiana, I can't remember specifically where it is, but it's called Werewolf Hollow, where people have had werewolf sightings.
Have you ever met a werewolf?
Not to my knowledge.
I have.
Really?
I got to see him shift. Yes.
That's
It was
horrifying.
one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Like top 5. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about it?
I don't know if there's much to say. It wasn't exactly like the movies. It was a spiritual shift, but you could see it in his etheric form.
Oh.
You could see his hackles come up and his snout come out, and the way he started moving and carrying himself was completely different. It was canine, it was lupine, and I cautiously walked up to him and I said, "You just turned into a werewolf." And he's like, "Yeah, you noticed?"
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Which, that will be another conversation for another day, but I feel like that does kind of go into a territory of conversation that is controversial and maybe not taken too seriously. And specifically what I'm talking about is the conversation of the reality of people who fall into the realm of Therians or otherkin. But we're not discussing that right now. We're discussing cryptids.
Right.
We also have a troll population.
Do we?
So Indiana, and this is true for a lot of places in the United States, we have a lot of what would be considered like crybaby bridges.
That's true.
We have a lot of what would be considered bunnyman tunnels. The bunnyman tunnels is really more of a UK sort of phenomenon, but we have something similar here. And I'm sure it happens all over the United States. But aside from that, we also have bridge trolls. There are a few places in Indiana where there is lore that people have spotted trolls living underneath the bridges. Usually not big bridges. These are usually like smaller rural bridges that you would find these bridge trolls.
Makes sense.
But several years ago, me and a group of paranormal investigators that I was an original member of did kind of like a haunted tour of Indiana, and part of that also included going to places where there had been cryptid sightings, and we'd gone to a couple of these bridges, and it was, you know, we didn't make any sightings, but it was really interesting to visit those places.
Neat. I want to talk about the Fae during this, because we were talking about land spirits, and the Fae are spirits of the land, but they're not necessarily cryptids. There's a lot of overlap there, but the Fae are usually seen more as spirits and less as actual animals or creatures.
Yes.
However, I've had a Fae encounter that seemed very tangible, very real. And that was, I was out in, it was called Harrison Crawford Forest at the time. It's now Obannon Woods. It's down in Harrison and Crawford counties. I was walking with my brother, my younger brother. We were out on a hike. We were several hours into the hike, and I noticed what I can only describe as a tomte, an actual like garden gnome figure about this tall, floating above the ground, about 2 feet above the ground, and running alongside of us. His little feet just going in the air. Dressed all in different shades of green. He had the pointy hat, the big white beard. And I thought, wow, I've been hiking for too long. I'm seeing things. This is bizarre. And we got further down the trail, and my brother turns to me and he says, "Do you see it too?" And I was like, "You mean the thing over there?" And he's like, yeah, the gnome, the garden gnome. Do you see the garden gnome? And I was like, yeah, it's been following us for a while. And he goes, "Okay, what do we do? You're the witch." And I said, "Well, it doesn't seem to want to do us any harm. If it did, it would have done something by now. I think it's just observing what we're doing and making sure that we don't do anything bad to where it's at. So we should probably just keep moving and let it know that we don't want to do it any harm." Which is exactly what we did. We cleared out the area and went back down the trail, and we got back to my parents' place, which is where we had met up for the hike. And we were telling my mother about it, and she didn't believe us for a second. And she gave us both sheets of paper, and she said, "Okay, I want you to draw exactly what you saw, and don't look at each other's pictures, just draw what you saw." So we both drew the same picture of the same silly little garden gnome, all in green. And I don't know if she knew what to think after that. but if I hadn't seen it myself, I wouldn't have believed it, because it was a little too classic and a little too precious. however it was there, and it was not like a spirit that I was seeing. It was like an actual physical being. Yeah.
I was still living with my parents, and it was super late at night, and I was leaving my bedroom to walk across the hall to the restroom. So when I left my bedroom, I looked down the hall into the living room where it was dark, and I happened to notice that there were 3 little motes of light kind of flying around. Now initially I was like, are my eyes messing with me? Because I'd just come out of a well-lit room into a dark space. But these lights continued to fly and float around the living room and fly around each other. And it just made me really happy, because at the time I had been working with what one might call fairy witchcraft. And it was just really cool to see. So then I went to sleep, and then the next morning I'd gotten up to leave and go somewhere, and I looked over at my bedroom window and noticed that the ground beneath it had a toadstool ring.
Oh wow.
Which was really cool. It felt very affirming and validating in my fairy practice at the time. And it wasn't the only time I came across a fairy ring. And I know that scientifically speaking, that's just how toadstools and mushrooms grow.
Right.
Toadstools and mushrooms naturally grow in rings. But there's still magic behind that. Because we've added magic to that.
That's right.
And you know, that folklore is there for a reason. It's a part of our folklore. I have another story, and this one's more cryptid oriented.
Okay.
And it kind of is in the vein of a werewolf. You asked if I'd ever met a werewolf. Technically, no.
Okay.
But kind of.
Okay.
So in my hometown, the one that I mentioned that's kind of on the western border, eastern border, I'm so sorry, eastern border of Indiana. There is kind of a loose local legend of this thing called the Warhoot, which what this thing basically is if you've ever heard legends of like SWs or of any kind of shape-shifty, kind of creepy canid sort of thing. A lot of people have talked about these things, like seeing these things running alongside their cars and stuff like that. This is what that is.
Okay.
And when I was out and about with this particular paranormal investigation group, we were in a cemetery in my hometown, because the cemetery has some haunting activity. It has unfortunately a fairly high population of children in it. And we were there very late at night. It was probably like 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And I happened to notice something moving around in the trees surrounding the cemetery. Not like up in the trees, but like in the tree line. And it was largely dog-shaped, but there was like a long, weird lankiness to it.
I don't like that at all.
No, I didn't like it either. Strangely, this thing did not approach us. I saw, like, you know when you see an animal in the dark and you see the glint of its eyes? It was like that. But like at a much higher height than, like, say, a raccoon, and some might say a mountain lion perhaps, but we didn't have mountain lions in Richmond, in a tiny Indiana town that sits in a valley. We didn't have mountain lions.
Right.
I think the worst we might have had was the occasional coyote, but we didn't even have those that bad. And then this thing loped off into the forest, and then we heard it howl. Howl is not the right word. People have talked about the sound of this creature being like a combination of like a donkey braying and a woman screaming, and it very much is like that. But very scary. And yeah, that was probably one of my most prominent cryptid encounters. Unfortunately, I never got a good look at it, which is kind of common for cryptids. You usually don't get a good look at them. Except in your fairy story, you got a very good look.
Very good look at it.
And you know, for me in my fairy story, I didn't see the nature of the fairies. And also, I just want to throw this in there. I understand very well through years of studying fairy folklore that the idea of the tiny winged flower fairies, pixies, and things like that is not common. Fairy type of fairy, I don't know what it was that I saw in my living room, but I associated it with fairies. So for me, it's a fairy story. Could it have been something else? Possibly. But it's a really simple but profound thing that happened to me, and I really cherish that memory.
Corn.
Saltburn, oh my God.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I have. Do I, as a Midwestern witch, connect with the land? I do it through my red soul. This idea that the enlivening force in me also enlivens the land around me. And I get a lot of power from the ancestral land that I grew up on. The being down for me in Harrison County near Corden, Indiana, is very empowering and sometimes a little upsetting. Not gonna lie there, but it's land that my family has been on for hundreds of years, which as a white person is a long time on this continent. And I get a lot of energy and affirmation and power from being on that soil. How about you?
The way that I connect to the land as a traditional witch in the Midwest is I remove the USB cord from my tailbone and I plug it into the dirt, and that's how I connect to the
Beautiful.
land.
I love that. So demure.
In all reality, jokes aside, I spend a lot of time studying the local flora and fauna of the Midwest. I think it's really valuable to understand the plants and animals that exist around you, because more than just using the physical parts of those things, it's important to understand the spirits of those things, to develop a relationship with the spirits of those things. I think a lot of witches go into the world and they're like, oh, an herb. I'm going to use this herb in spell and it will do what I want it to. But if you have no relationship with that spirit, that herb, with the animal that you might be trying to work with, you're not going to have as much success as if you take time to understand those spirits and build a relationship with those spirits. So for me, it's very much about building a relationship with the spirits of the land. I would love to build a relationship with my ancestors. Unfortunately, I don't know my ancestors. I know my recent ones, and I only know my maternal ones. I don't know my paternal ones. Don't know if I want to know my paternal ones. Yeah. But yeah, so for me, it's about understanding the spirits of the land, the plants of the land, the animals of the land, what those plants and animals provide or give from the land. That's how I do it. And the USB cord.
The howling whispers tear at the scars, leaving a broken and vandalized jar. The soul ignited and burns as a flame, turns all to ash with its village to blame. Crooked finger bent with intent, sending confusion and chaos where meant. Evil's